Why do some people display a deep hatred for non-government solutions? Stay tuned. This is Bob Otten, producer of Libertarian Viewpoint. Libertarianism is all about liberty, the exercise of freedom that does not impinge upon the rights of others. We constantly hear the drum roll of government solutions. This show's purpose is to show you, the viewer, why non-government solutions are a better alternative. Today I have a treat for you, Walter Block, the economist, who spoke at the joint Minnesota and Wisconsin state conventions this year.
Let me talk about something else. And we're all adults here, so we can let our hair down. Those of us that have hair, some of us can't let down my hair. But why is it that we only get 1% of the vote? Why is it that people are so viciously anti-Ron Paul? The way the newspapers and the media treat him and the way the people go along with it. Why is it such an uphill struggle? Why are we like pushing the rock of Sisyphus up and then it comes down? Well, I've got a theory, and it's not because we don't do a good job. It's not because we don't mention Hong Kong, or it's not because we don't have almost natural experiments like East and West Germany, North and South Korea, where's the population going? It's because of biology. We are hardwired to accept explicit cooperation. What's explicit cooperation? Benevolence. Think of us back in the day, a million years ago, when we were in the caves or in the trees or wherever we were. If you had two tribes and they were equally able, they both had an opposable thumb and they both had the same brain capacity, the same strength, if one of them was benevolent, they would survive. Like if I'm a tribe member and I'm sick this week and you help me and next week I help you, our tribe survives much better than if, screw you, as Cartman would say, one of my favorite characters, screw you guys, screw you guys, screw you guys. We're in a much better position. So we're very, very hardwired for benevolence. We see somebody get sick or a child crying and we are filled with the milk of human kindness. And this was okay when we lived in tribes of 25 people, 50 people, something like that, where everyone knew everyone, where everyone knew what they could depend upon other people for. But there is also such a thing as implicit cooperation. What the hell is implicit cooperation? Implicit cooperation is markets. Now, I'm from New Orleans, and after Katrina came, the prices of pretty much everything that people wanted, orange juice, milk, baby diapers, gasoline, just skyrocketed up through the roof. This was implicit cooperation. If you understand anything about economics, you understand that really high prices have two benevolent effects. One is, if you go to the Walmart and the prices are the same old prices, the first 300 people in line are going to grab it all. Whereas if the price skyrockets, they're not going to say, well, I need 10 gallons of water. They're going to say, well, maybe 1 gallon of water will do. Similarly with orange juice or diapers or whatever else. The second benevolent effect of raising prices is that, see, right now, take Minneapolis or St. Paul or Wisconsin, what incentive do you guys have to help us down in New Orleans? Well, you only have two. One is benevolence, and the other is profit-seeking. Now, benevolence gets you only so far, but if you have a problem, you want to motivate all human capacities to help us. So if the price rises, then you're going to say to yourself, hey, if I take a truckload of gallons of water or gallons of orange juice, I can make a killing. And then you can help us. So we see that higher prices have benefits. We see it if we know economics, or just basic economics, which we all are familiar with. However, what was the attitude of Governor Blanco at the time? Oh, they're price gougers, put them in jail. There was even a case where there was a lineup. My friend Munger from North Carolina tells this story, where there was a whole lineup. Some guys from Kentucky brought down gallons of orange juice or water or something like that, and they were all waiting online to get them. Now, the ordinary price of, say, a gallon of water is 50 cents, 80 cents. They were selling it for 25 bucks a gallon. Somebody online had a cell phone. We ought to ban cell phone. No, just kidding. And he called the cops. Now, he was waiting online, which shows that he valued that water at more than 25 bucks. Otherwise, why would he buy it? He called the cops, and the cops came and shut it down, and all the people online applauded it. Now, what the hell is that? They say that contradictions don't exist in reality. There was a contradiction. On the one hand, it's sort of the biological part of the people was at war with each other. On the one hand, these guys were good guys. They bought water from Kentucky. On the other hand, they were price gougers. They were evil. I think that the reason we have such a struggle, such a hard time getting the idea across, is because we are hardwired for benevolence, for explicit cooperation, but not for implicit cooperation through markets. Markets are greedy, they're selfish, they're evil, the capitalist pig, and the Wall Street people is good and all that stuff. That's why we have such a hard time. We shouldn't blame ourselves. We're doing the best we can, and thank God for people like Gary Johnson, Ron Paul, other people, Ludwig von Mises, Ayn Rand. We're doing a lot better than we deserve to do, because we have such great people. But we have to be realistic about this. This is the problem that we face. It's not going to be easy. But we just have to do the best we can. Our duty, our goal, our motivation is, all we can do is do our best. And if we succeed, great. And if we don't, at least we try. And it's so much fun to tweak those noses in the New York Times and the NBC and all that, and just take those noses and twist them. It's just the greatest thing. Every time I get freshman class in my school, any school I've ever been in, they're all a bunch of commie pickups. Where did we get this from? Biology. In my opinion. Okay, with that introduction, let me just keep on BSing about stuff. I'll free associate my psychiatrist to see what a nut I am. So what is libertarianism? Somebody said that Vince Lombardi said, well, here's a football. Well, I'm going to go right down to the basics. What is it? It's really two things. It's the non-aggression principle coupled with homesteading for urban territory. What's the non-aggression principle? Keep the goddamn bits to yourself. Don't be grabbing other people without their permission. Sadomasochism is okay, boxing is okay because you get permission. But don't be grabbing other people against their will, and don't be grabbing their property. Now, there was a young girl, she's sitting there, and she asked Gary, well, what will you do for my education? Now, Gary probably gave a good political answer, but I'm going to give what I think is a libertarian answer, and the answer is not a goddamn thing. I'm not going to get any education from you. Because if I get any education from you, mainly money for your education, I have to take money from someone else who's an innocent person. What the hell am I doing grabbing his money to give to you? That's not the business of government. If there's any business of government, and I'm an anarchist, so I don't think there is any, but when I play the limited government role, the only proper role for government is to protect persons and property rights. And to that end, we have armies to keep foreign bad guys off us, as Gary said, defense, not offense. We have police to keep local bad guys off us, not to put people in jail for drugs and pornography and prostitution and stuff like that. And then we have courts to determine who the good guys and who the bad guys are. And that's it. Of course, if I want to grab your tie, it's a great tie, red, white, and blue. Dick, what's your name? Timothy, sorry. I have two ways of getting his time. One, I could say, I'll give you 50 bucks, I'll give you 100 bucks, I'll be your best friend forever. And if he says, no, I just can't get his time. The other way is the political process. I'm a great demagogue, I get a majority vote, and we all say, well, you got to give me your time. That's theft, just because the government says so. I mean, Hitler came to power through a democratic process. F the democratic process. Yes. There's such a thing as tyranny of the majority. We libertarians, or me libertarian anyway, I can't speak for anyone else, believe in the non-aggression axiom and in the non-aggression principle. Well, now how do we determine that that's his time? Maybe he stole it from me yesterday. In which case, if I grab it, then I'm not the thief, he's the thief for keeping it. So we have to have this other theory of homesteading virgin land. And then a title transfer theory. Well, homesteading comes from John Locke. You mix your labor with the land, you own it. I domesticate a cow, you put in some corn, we later trade. So voluntary trade would be a legitimate title transfer. Or we have a bet, or we have gambling, or we have inheritance. And that's it. That's the libertarian theory in a nutshell. 2 minutes worth or 5 minutes worth. Keep your minutes to yourself, and don't grab other people's property. Okay, now what I wanted to do, one of the things I had in mind was the minimum wage law. So let me run through that just very briefly for the intro. This is the intro part of my discussion. A lot of people think the minimum wage law is a great thing because, you know, right now it's $7.50, and that's really not a living wage. Living wage should be $10 an hour. The obvious rejoinder is, why be so niggardly? I'll use that word advisedly. Not racist. It doesn't mean what you think it means or what some people think it means. Why not make it $100 an hour? Why just $10 an hour? Well, obviously, anyone whose productivity is below $100 an hour will be out of a job. But right now it's $7.50. What about the people whose productivity is $5 an hour? If your productivity is $5 an hour, and I'm an employer and I'm thinking of hiring you, and I have to pay you $7.50, I'm going to lose $2.50 off of you. So I'm not going to hire you. That's why the unemployment rate of black teenagers is skyrocketing, because many of them are below that productivity level. Why? There's a whole bunch of theories, you know, the vestige of slavery and Jim Crow and unfairness and the drug war, where a lot of them are in jail, and you don't enhance your productivity when you're in jail. So the minimum wage law is not a floor under wages and you raise them higher and then people get richer. Rather, it's a barrier over which you have to jump to get a job, and the higher you raise it, the harder it is to jump over it. And a lot of these kids aren't jumping over it. That's why you have such disproportionate unemployment. Okay, given that the minimum wage law is evil, and my addition to this is the people responsible for it ought to be going to jail. Everyone have a Libertarian Nuremberg trial. That's good to be. Now you might say, well, this is ex post facto law. Right now the minimum wage law is the law and they're just obeying it. Well, that's what the Germans said. The Nazis, they said, we're just obeying orders. These are evil orders. You shouldn't have a minimum wage law, and the people responsible for it really are guilty for a lot of bad stuff, because when teenagers are unemployed and they're bored and they get into crime, and they just create havoc. So who favors this? Why do we have this? Evil unions, which is, I don't know, not double entendre, I'm missing the word, but it means that they're necessarily evil, but that's not true, because we have a theory of unionism. And now I'm getting to more advanced libertarian theory. We're not necessarily against all unions. If a union limited itself to a mass quit, that's it. Look, you guys all work for me. And Timothy, I'll pick on him again since he has that great tie that he stole from me yesterday, comes to me and says, Block, I need a raise. I'm making 10, I need 15, and I give him the one finger salute, and tough. But if he comes to me and says, well, there are 100 people here, and we all want an increase in wage, and if we don't get it, we're all going to leave. I start thinking, well, you know, I can replace you all, but it's going to be a pain in the neck, and I have contracts I want to fulfill. So, you know, I'll bargain, okay, instead of 10 to 15, what do you say, about 13 or something like that. And if all the union did was that would be legitimate. Because if you don't have the right to quit, you're a slave. The only problem with slavery is you couldn't quit. Otherwise, slavery wasn't so bad. You could pick cotton, they could rule, you know, it was groovy. But you couldn't quit when they came with the whips. So quitting is voluntary association, freedom of association. So if one person can quit, the others don't lose their right to quit just because other people quit. And yet the early antitrust laws prohibited them. They used antitrust laws against unions just for quitting, which is wrong. But unions do a second thing. Unions do a second thing, and you see, the point is, when the union says, well, we need a raise from 30 to 35, the first thing the employer thinks of is, well, maybe I'll substitute out of the suddenly more expensive input and into a cheaper alternative competing input, namely unskilled labor. So I'll fire some of these unions, I'll hire some kids who are unskilled, and instead of the skilled people working, they'll be foremen for the unskilled kids, and I'll get the job done. Similar if you're making rowboats, and you can make it out of wood or plastic, and I tell you wood doubled in price, well, you make it out of plastic. You tend to substitute out of the suddenly more expensive input. Well, when the union says we got to go from 30 to 50, and I start hiring workers, unskilled workers, the union doesn't much like that. And what the union says is, these workers, they're taking our jobs, and they call them scabs, which is, I think, hate speech. If you're going to have hate laws, that would be it. And they start beating them up. But the problem with beating up scabs is sometimes the scabs fight back. So much better to pass a law that makes it impossible or uneconomic to hire them. And what is that law? The minimum wage law. So it's just pure, indescribable evil, unions and minimum wage laws. So don't think that we're not filled with the milk of human kindness. Don't think that we hate the poor. Obviously, what we're trying to do is protect the poor. But in order to see that, you need some economics. You need a little sophistication. The average person who listens to NBC or Time Magazine or, I don't know, the Wall Street Journal or New York Times doesn't understand this. You know, it's sort of a thing. If you're against the minimum wage, you're against the poor. Nonsense. Okay, what I'm going to do now for advanced libertarianism, I've got two things on my list, abortion and private roads. I've also got crime, reparations, and taking money from government, but I don't know that I'll get to everything before I get the hook, but I'll start. Let me do roads. That's my most recent book, Privatizing Roads. My motto is, if it moves, privatize it. If it doesn't move, privatize it. And since everything either moves or doesn't move, privatize it. And one of the major reasons for it, I think Scott mentioned it very clearly when he talked about certification agencies competing. The advantage of competing certification agencies is if one of them screws up, they go broke. The reason we have pretty good wristwatches and pretty good ties and pretty good everything is because people go broke if they don't do a good job. It's the same thing with the FDA. I mean, the FDA screwed up on thalidomide, they're still in business. The Army Corps of Engineers and the FEMA, between them, killed 1,900 people in New Orleans, which isn't so bad from an economic point of view. They're cruel and heartless. But what really bugs us is they're still in business. Whereas any private company that did that, they wouldn't be in business. Okay, let's talk about privatizing highways. Do you know how many people die on the highways every year? It's about 38,000, 40,000. It keeps varying, but it's somewhere in the high 30,000s. And a lot of people say, well, the reason for this is speed, vehicle malfunction, driver error, drunken driving, all sorts of things. Nonsense on a stick. Look, suppose this restaurant here went broke, and we're market analysts, and we're brought in to analyze it, and we start saying, well, the reason they went broke is lousy food, cold food, the waitress service was bad, dirty conditions, location was bad. Would we accept that for a moment? No. Those are just proximate causes. The ultimate cause, the goddamn manager didn't get a guy with a broom, he didn't get a good cook, he didn't get a chef, he didn't locate in the right place, right? Look, if I take a gun and I shoot over there, and a quarter of a mile away somebody dies, and now you all grab me as a murderer, I say, tut, 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 I'm not the murderer, it was the bullet that did it. Well, the bullet is the proximate cause, but I'm responsible for the murder. Well, the government is responsible for some 40,000 people a year dying. And you get these people who add up the number of deaths caused by government, they never include this. They really should, because the government is killing people on the road. They're killing them like flies. And the point is that if we had competing road services, competing roads, my road I do certain things, your road you do something else, and we'll see who has fewer deaths. And if my road has fewer deaths, I'm going to be able to charge more, you're going to go broke, and maybe I'll take over you and we'll have better conditions, just like we do in computers and in shoes. For example, take speed kills. Well, maybe it's not speed, maybe it's the variation in speed. You know, a lot of highways have a minimum of 40 and maximum of 70. And you get some little old ladies, I hate to be sexist about it, but what the heck, it's fine. And they're doing 45. And then you get other people who are doing 80. And then sometimes the people who are doing 55 in the 70, 40 to 70, they're sitting in the left lane. And so if you want to get around, you've got to go like that, which might create accidents. So maybe it's not speed, maybe it's the variance in speed, I don't know. All I know is that it might be. And that if one road can try this and another road can try that, maybe the best way is 50 mile an hour in the right-hand lane, 65 at 80. Maybe that will reduce deaths. Do I know? No, I don't know. But that's possible. Another thing that ticks me off is, you know, these trucks that pass each other? And it takes about 15 miles for the one to pass the other, and they're racing, and then I'm not going to let this mother get past me. And if you see two trucks lined up, what you're going to do is go about 95 to get past them both. Maybe that causes accidents. Maybe the rule should be that if anyone's trying to pass you, you slow down 5 miles an hour, so it only takes a minute for them to get, I don't know, it might be. Maybe what we ought to do everywhere that they have, what do you call it, dance, they ought to have a big cross or a big Jewish star or a big whatever. Big one to indicate what's going on. Maybe, you know, those cars that get in accidents, they look sort of like an accordion. Maybe stick them on a pedestal, show people. I don't know. All I know, as an economist, that if you have competition, you have a better product. Now, in my book, which I'm not trying to sell, although if you want to buy it, that's fine, but it's available for free on the web. Just go to my website, walterblock.com, and you can get all this stuff for free. I deal with a whole bunch of objections, how you could maybe, how can you make roads without eminent domain? Would you have to stop every 3 seconds and put a penny in there in the next lady's thing or something like that? There are millions of objections to this. Maybe I'll do with 1 or 2 now, but I must have 20 objections listed. I can't get. Another one is, well, how about if they barricade you? You're in your house, and all 4 roads are privately owned, and we'll let you out. Or they say, sure, you can come out $1 million every time. Well, the answer to that one is, see, right now when you buy a house, you get title insurance. Make sure that the guy who's selling you the house has the title to it. Well, now you get access insurance. Before you bought the house, you make sure that the guys who own the road are going to let you out at the end. And they have every incentive to do so because they want people on their road. Otherwise, if nobody's on their road, they're not going to make any money. So they have to allow you to contractually tie them up so they can't do this. Okay, I've given you a little hint about private roads. I could go on for really an hour and a half on that, but I now want to do abortion, which is a puzzle for libertarians. It's, we have a bifurcation. Ron Paul is a pro-life person. Garrett Johnson's a pro-choice person. What's the correct libertarian view? Well, what's the correct libertarian view according to me, anyway? You know, you have 10 libertarians in a room, you have 11 opinions. So, so I'll give you my take on this. Now, my take is a compromise between these two. It's a compromise between these two. And it's not a compromise in the sense that somebody says 2 + 2 is 4, and somebody says 2 + 2 is 6, and we compromise and we say 2 + 2 is 5. Not that kind of a compromise, it's a philosophical compromise. It's a philosophical compromise. How does it work? Well, I'm going to take both sides. So I'm going to first ask, when does life start? Now, in the Jewish tradition, you know when the fetus is viable? When it gets out of medical school? Seriously, in the Jewish tradition, it's when the heart beats. My view is that it's a person when there's a fertilized egg. The sperm alone, the egg alone, aren't going to make it because in nature they just don't eventuate in a person. But a fertilized egg in the right environment, it's a human being. And I say this for 2 reasons. One, so that I don't make a straw man, because I am going to take both sides of this, depending. So how does the compromise work? Based on property rights. We're fetishists about property rights. Property rights, property rights, property rights. Property rights, I won't keep going on that strain, but property rights are the key. So the question is, whose property rights are there? And the obvious answer is the mother's property rights. It's her womb, her stomach, or wherever it is that the baby is. It's her property rights. Suppose somebody trespasses on your lawn. You have a right to take a bazooka and shoot him? No. Too harsh, although there's some libertarians who would say that. But what you have to do is remove him in the gentlest manner possible. You have to say, sir, did you realize this is my property? Please leave. And if he leaves, well, you can't shoot him. There's an accident. You remove him in the gentlest manner possible. Well, suppose a woman doesn't want the fetus. She has a right to remove, but not to kill. Because abortion is a 2-stage thing. Remember talking about unions? Really, unions were a 2-stage thing, right to quit and preventing other people from taking a job. to get back to unions for a second, when a man divorces his wife, it's a tragedy, but it's even worse if he surrounds his ex-wife's house with his friends and any person she tries to date, they beat him up. That's roughly what the union does with the scabs. So unionism is a two-stage thing, or a strike is a two-stage thing. Well, so is an abortion. Abortion is not a one thing, it's a two thing. It's a twofer. One, evict, two, kill. Very different. And the compromise is, you have a right to evict, it's your property, but you have no right to kill, that's murder. And yet there are these partial birth abortions where the baby is 8.5 months old, and they go in to suck the brains out, and now they kill the baby inside and then they pull it out. If that's not first-degree murder, I don't know what is. So you have a right to evict, but not to kill. So how will this work out? Right now, the fetus is viable outside the womb in the third trimester, right? In the 7th, 8th, 9th month, especially the 9th month, baby can go to the host mother and live. So if a woman wants to abort a baby at the 8th month or the 9th month, she has no right to abort it, she has only the right to evict it. Now, as medical technology improves, this will go back to the 8th, the 7th, and the 6th month, and hopefully in 5 years, if we don't blow ourselves up by then, we'll be able to take the baby in the two-stage cell and put it somewhere else, a host mother or whatever, test tube, machine. What about 50 years ago, or 100 years ago? Then the libertarian view, at least as I'm articulating it, is, well, you have a right to kill. Not that you have a right to kill, but you have a right to evict, and if the eviction means killing, tough, because it's your property. A little girl, 15 years old, walks down the street, she gets raped, and now she's got something growing in her that she doesn't want. And you mean to tell me she can't evict it? Of course she can evict it. She can't kill it because the baby's innocent. The father isn't innocent, but the baby is innocent. So that's, in a nutshell, again, I've written maybe 15 articles about that, and maybe Sam and I will publish a book on this. So I've got a ton of stuff written about this with objections, but I only sort of want to tease you with the theory so I get on to other things.
Well, we're out of time. If you find yourself agreeing with the speaker, you might be a libertarian. To find out, take the world's smallest quiz at theadvocates.org. Remember, Libertarian Viewpoint brings you the non-government, liberty-based solutions that other media refuse to tell you about. Liberty works and is always the best choice. If anyone in government can prove otherwise, I challenge them to speak up. To view past shows, search YouTube using Libertarian Viewpoint. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for other shows of Libertarian Viewpoint.